What does this say? It's non-logical. I don't understand this. I think I made this slide up. Math's content cannot come just from its non-logical expression.
Maybe non-logical should be logical.
No, the first part of the sentence makes sense.
From just non-logical axioms.
What's a non-logical axiom?
Like a mathematical axiom.
It's not deductive,
Yeah.
Say it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't understand it. I thought it made sense at the time. Okay. He feels that there's this thing called indefinite repetition, which he wants to argue is intuitive. And he thinks induction is another one of these principles of mathematical reasoning that transcends logic. And actually, this is one of the ways we talked about induction. One thing that the principle of mathematical induction enables you to do is to basically do like an infinite mode exponent, right? We know that 0 has the property, and whenever a number has a property, the next one does. Suppose we know that. Then we know that 1 has the property. And since 1 is the property, whenever a number has the property, the next one does. Then we know that 2 has the property, and so on. The conclusion of induction, that all numbers have this property, is a sort of an infinite modus ponens. It transcends modus ponens. It's extra logical. It goes beyond the logic. And he feels very strongly that this principle of mathematical induction cannot be proven, as Bertrand Russell and Frege want to do. And he thinks that it is not a part of logic, that induction is an extra logical axiom, a mathematical axiom. He doesn't even think it's an axiom. He does not like axiomatics in general, as he refers to it. He thinks induction is something else. He thinks it is just a mathematical method, and any attempt to justify this mathematical method is not going to work, because its justification is just the pure intuition that we have of going from one thing to another. The mind has a direct intuition of its power to perform an indefinite repetition of the same act. I think this is his language. He really does not like logicism. He has all kinds of moments at which he makes fun of Frege and Russell. This is one of his most famous quotes. He says, the logicist definitions of number are circular because 0, this is as Frege defines it, is the number of things satisfying a condition which is never satisfied. But as never means in no case, I do not see that progress is great. In other words, he thinks that the logicists have sort of snuck number concept into their logic. And their claim to have created numbers out of logic is just crap. He thinks the definition of 1 uses an understanding of 2. I think some people in this class kind of said that a little bit, right? After all, what is the definition of exactly 1? Well, it's like that there exists an x and there exists a y, such that p of x and p of y. Wait a second. Aren't you kind of just using 2 somehow now? In this definition, or at least the concept of 2, that there exists an x and there exists a y, and that x is not y. Wait, I'm doing that wrong.
What? No.
Sorry. There exists, what am I trying to do?
Exists an x
Sorry.
for all y.
For all y is what I meant to say. Such that p of x and for all y, if p of y, then x equals y. But somehow, in order to define 1, I need like 2 variables or something. So he's just not impressed by this. And he's read Frege's Begriffsschrift very carefully, and he thinks that this logic is just mathematics in disguise. Modern symbolic logic, and by this point that he's writing, it's already sort of now kind of in its almost modern form. He thinks that modern symbolic logic has this infinite combinatorial nature to it. That somehow in like defining the actual symbols very carefully, recursively, that we are sort of doing recursion. He thinks that logic has stolen recursion, okay? And as recursion is one of the basic and intuitive tools of mathematics, and is something which is fundamentally arithmetic, then the logicists have snuck mathematical principles into their logic based on the way that they like recursively define the validity of their logical expressions in a kind of recursion, basically. That the logicists cannot avoid intuition either. He's like, I'm extremely unimpressed if you create these piano axioms and prove that they're consistent. Because any proof that the piano axioms are consistent, what will that proof look like? Well, that proof will look like sort of quantifying over all possible logical proofs or something, and showing that these axioms can never lead to a contradiction. But if you're quantifying over all possible logical proofs and showing that no contradiction will arise, then you're going to have to do it by induction on the length of formulas. And if you're doing it by induction on the length of formulas, you're proving that these axioms are consistent. You're using induction. You're just using a kind of recursive type induction. He thinks modern logic has just taken induction and made it a part of logic, but really it's a part of math. This is what I was saying. The definitions of well-formed formulas and syntactically valid proofs are fundamentally recursive. And so the logicists cannot reduce arithmetic to something intuition-free, because the recursion, which is a key property of the natural numbers, is sort of hiding in the definitions of the logical operator. Do you guys find this a little bit like, have any of you been like sort of thinking this all along, or I don't know, can I get some feedback from the room?
I disagree.
Disagree? Okay.
Me too.
You like the logic. Yeah, me too, kind of. You don't like this. You think this is crap.
Yeah.
Cool. Good. All right. He died eventually, and that was that. All right. Good. We have 15 minutes. Perfect. Blah blah. We did this already. All right. Good. Good. Twin prime conjecture. We talked about that already, right? Well, okay. Now a warm up to the second half of this lecture. Consider the following.
I've seen this slide before.
Consider the following function. Ready? It's going to blow your mind. Here's what this function does. It takes an input. If the twin prime conjecture is true, this function outputs x. If the twin prime conjecture is false, this function outputs x plus 2. Is this a function?
If we plug in a number, we'll figure out if it's true or not, right?
Is this a well-defined function? Is this a mathematical object which we can create, manipulate, use, etc.? Ezra, you made a face. Talk to me. Good. Okay, Frege would say this is certainly a function. Look, the twin prime conjecture is either true or it's false. If the twin prime conjecture is true, then this is a function which outputs whatever you input to it. And if the twin prime conjecture is false, then it outputs 2 more than the input. So this is a perfectly good function. People like Poincaré and others found this to be stretching the bounds of mathematics beyond somewhere it should go. And they objected very strongly to this very, very kind of non-constructive function. And said, look, since I don't know whether the twin prime conjecture is true or false, I'm not allowed to have such a function. Such a function does not exist. Such a function can only exist after the twin prime conjecture's truth is like settled.
Wait a minute, that's strange. I don't
It
want
is strange.
truth to be time dependent.
Yeah, neither does Frege, but other people do feel that it should be.
So the function becomes...
Take another example.
Once I write a proof?
No, we don't need another example. All right, what I'm now going to introduce you to something is you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. Most people hate it, but sometimes people love it. It's one of these things that sounds outrageously, ridiculously wrong, even disgusting when the first time you hear it. And the more and more and more you read about it, the more you think, oh man, these guys have some good ideas. Okay, Intuitionism. This is an entire branch in the philosophy of mathematics. And, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we don't need these quotes. Okay, this is, to some extent, not to some extent, this is basically, this entire branch of mathematics is basically due to a single person. Lutzen Egbertus Jan Brouwer, a Dutch guy, born in 1881, died in 1960, lived a nice long life. He had he claims to have, as a very young man, had all the basic ideas of Intuitionism, but was scared to publish them because he would just be attacked, and held back, and made quite a career doing some very famous and groundbreaking sort of work in abstract topology, and ironically, which are not consistent with his mathematical beliefs. So So like his proofs that he became famous for would not be valid in the mathematical philosophy that he pioneers later. But only after becoming famous, he publishes what he really thinks about things. He was very influenced by Kant. Actually, let me skip this. All right. Okay. Let's skip this too. All right. Oh yeah. One thing that happens is there's this guy, Wheel, I believe his name is pronounced W-I-L. His first name is God, I forget. I think it's Herman. Herman Wheel, who begins as Hilbert's most trusted colleague, and then defects and becomes an intuitionist. And Hilbert is really upset about this, and he hates Intuitionism. And this guy Wheel is quoted heavily in the last couple chapters of Loss of Certainty. And one by one, these formalists kind of like defect and go over to Brouwer's school. All right. A lot of these people are influenced by this guy Leopold Kronecker. He got mentioned very briefly as Cantor's like enemy. He is a finitist. He's not an intuitionist, but he's kind of a pre-intuitionist. He literally does not believe in infinity. He thinks that there are only a finite number of objects exist. And that all math should be based on the natural numbers. His famous quote is, God made the natural numbers, all else is the work of man. I guess potentially not the actual. Okay, Hilbert, this kind of quote doesn't really make any sense at this point. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, good. I'll go back to those quotes later. All right, so what is Intuitionism all about? All right. Well, the problem is, let's skip this too. All right. Intuitionism thinks that there is no mathematical reality outside of the minds of human beings. That truth and falsity does have a temporal aspect to it. That once a statement has been proven true, it is therefore true from that point on. But before it was proven true, it simply lacks a truth value. This is the thing that you didn't like, yeah.
So does it become true when I conceive of the idea for the proof, or when I write the proof down, or when I publish the proof?
It's a good question.
People read the proof?
What if you?
Yeah, that's it. Those are all really good questions.
What if you wrote a proof and then realized the proof is wrong?
Yeah,
Like
this is
All good questions. Yep, good. All right. So what is Intuitionism? Well, it was inspired by the constructivists of the 19th century, like Kronecker, and the people who were demanding, in light of this move towards abstraction in mathematics, to sort of go back and only embrace objects which can be constructed quite clearly. They were influenced by Poincare, but basically a single person invents Intuitionism, which is Brouwer. He also changes his positions over time, such that you can't quite ever really say this is the official position of Intuitionism, because it's an entire branch of mathematical philosophy with different people who change their minds over time, etc., etc. He writes these two basic papers. All right, I should say now that I have a certain fascination with this more than normal people, because I lived in the Netherlands for 3 years, and as this was a very formative couple of years of my life, I was in my young 20s and I was in a foreign country for the first time. I have a kind of a fascination, mostly love, a little bit of hate towards Dutch culture. Brouwer is so Dutch in so many ways. I don't know how I can articulate and convey this, but like it does not surprise me that it was someone from the Netherlands who came up with a branch of mathematics which says that you should be given far fewer tools to do your mathematics with. Because the entire culture of the Netherlands is based on sort of like, doing with like as little as possible. It's like a country with, there's a word for it, I can't remember now. What?
Scarcity.
Yeah, like scarcity and simplicity, and like, they sort of never got over, like asceticism, like when the Protestants came, the Netherlands was like this country, you hear these stories, but the Protestants come and they find these like temples full of like, various like oils and holy water and giant paintings, and they just like threw all that on the ground, right? And they thought that making graven images of any kind, where the stained glass windows, they hate all that. If you go to like a church, an old church in the Netherlands, it's like extremely bare, totally undecorated in any kind of way, cold, made of like stone, no pictures. They really, really came in and like smashed the stained glass, and the entire culture of the Netherlands is just like, being rich is like a sin. in the earliest part of the 20th century, every Dutch house was built with the entire front living room of your house, which was on the street, would have a glass window, and you basically were expected to have your curtains open at all times, because if your curtains were closed, then you must be doing something wrong. Everything is sort of everyone's business. There was this constant sort of obsession with sin. If you go to the Netherlands and you get like a sandwich, okay, it's changing now, but even while I was still there, if you go out to like outside of the cities, like you would just be like, you order like a roast beef sandwich. You get 2 pieces of bread and like a single slice of roast beef. Like they're just like a country who just thinks that it's like that the most admirable thing you can do is like, you know, just to be given the least. I don't know, my vocabulary is completely escaping me now. Anyway, he writes this book or this paper in 1907, Over the Grondslagen der Wiskunde, on the foundations of mathematics. Is similar to the German word for foundations. Wiskunde is the Dutch word for math. If you've been wondering why this weird little tulip has been hanging here for 4 years saying Wiskunde, that's the Dutch word for math. The second paper he writes in 1908, De onbetrouwbaarheid der logische principes. This word particularly is far stronger than what this word is saying. Okay, unreliability. Betrouwbaar is like faithful, like in the sense of like faithful to like your spouse. So he's saying that like this is like the unfaithfulness of the logical principles. He's comparing logic to like a lying and cheating spouse. Okay, and he argues in this paper that logic cannot be trusted, and what he in fact rejects is the principle of the excluded middle. He rejects P or not P.
That's cool.
Why might he reject P or not P? For example, can you come up with an example of something he might not believe P or not P?
What else is paradox?
Like Goldbach's conjecture. He thinks it is nonsense to say that the Goldbach's conjecture is either true or false. Because after all, I don't know whether it's true, and I don't know whether it's false, and so I don't know which one of them is. And so if I don't know whether it's true and I don't know whether it's false, it's just neither. And based on this rejection of the law of the excluded middle, he creates an entire alternative way of doing math and doing logic that does not rely on that logical principle. And if we go back a couple quotes, you can see, yes, you want to say something?
That's why we weren't allowed to use the law of excluded middle on our
This is unrelated. It was a theorem. I hope that was a joke. All right. Hilbert is like appalled, disgusted, and extremely angry about this, and he devotes the rest of his life essentially to like attacking intuitionism. He says taking the principle of the excluded middle from the mathematician is the same as prohibiting the boxer the use of his fists. Ooh, that's good. He writes, this is Hilbert still, I am astonished that a mathematician should doubt that the principle of the excluded middle is strictly valid as a mode of inference. I am even more astonished that as it seems the whole community of mathematicians who do the same has so constituted itself. I am most astonished by the fact that even in mathematical circles, the power of suggestion of a single man, however full of temperament and inventiveness, is capable of having the most improbable and eccentric effects.
Wow.
Yeah. This is Brouwer's response. Brouwer is now attacking Hilbert's philosophy of mathematics, which you'll recall is like formalist in nature. Brouwer says, formalism has received nothing but benefactions from intuitionism and may expect further benefactions. The formalist schools should therefore accord some recognition to intuitionism instead of polemicizing against it in sneering tones while not even observing proper mention of authorship. Okay, this quote doesn't make any sense because I have to tell you the story, which is what happens is that Brouwer, this becomes suddenly like kind of a fad, intuitionism. And Hilbert is so sort of disgusted by this that he reacts by importing many of the ideas of intuitionism into his meta-mathematics. Okay, more on that later. And this is Brouwer getting angry about this. This will make more sense in like a week. All right, so what do these intuitionists think? Well, this is quite bold. They think that something exists if it can be constructed in the mind, forming an experience. And if it cannot be constructed in the mind, then it does not exist. Okay. Math, he believes, this is Brouwer specifically, he believes that math has no language to it. The only thing that is true is what is in your head. What we call math is just descriptions of the math that goes on in our heads. He thinks axioms themselves have no meaning. Logic, he thinks he refers to it as, he thinks it's the study of linguistic patterns in our mathematical descriptions. That's all it is. It's not the real math. It's just linguistic patterns. And that logic is really a part of mathematics, not its own independent and prior thing. The truth of this is Blair. The truth of a mathematical statement can only be conceived via a mental construction that proves it to be true. And the communication between mathematicians only serves as a means to create the same mental processes in different minds. Okay, in other words, all those things that you think of as math, all that writing down and stuff that you do, all that writing down is just a communication between one mathematician and another. The mathematics itself is what's going on in your brain. And when you have to explain to someone else the math that's going on in your brain, you are forced to resort to certain words and symbols. And when you write that down, that's that thing that the logicists and the formalists have been calling math. Is just the communication between the mathematicians who are independently in their own minds doing mathematics. Yes?
And what if you like prove something in your mind, or even write it down, and then you like die in a fire and all your papers are burned and no one ever read anything? Like now, is it true or is it not true?
Unclear. Wait, I think we'll stop at the end of this slide. He says, this is Brower explaining what math is. The languageless constructions which arise from the self-unfolding of the basic intuition are exact and true by virtue of their presence in the memory. Okay, so I'll pause for a second. So the real math, the only true actual math, are these constructions that happen in your mind that are necessarily languageless and come from pure intuition about the real numbers and the natural numbers. And they can be true. But the human faculty of memory, which must survey these constructions, is by its nature limited and liable to error, even when it seeks the support of linguistic signs. So in other words, humans mess up. Thus, for a human mind, equipped with an unlimited memory, pure mathematics, practiced in solitude and without using linguistic signs, would be exact. But the exactness would be lost in mathematical communication between human beings, even with an unlimited memory, because they would still be thrown upon language as their means of understanding.
So this is
Brower is saying the real mathematics is what you do alone in a dark room by yourself. And it's never even quite perfect because you have a limited memory to do so. But at the moment at which you attempt to take that true mathematics that's happening in your brain and communicate it to another person so that they may create that mathematics inside their own brain, you are forced to resort to some symbols to capture what it is that you mean. Those symbols cannot fully and completely capture like the depth and clarity of the mathematical constructions in your mind, and so you've lost something in the symbols. And already once you write any math down, it becomes inexact. Whoa. Okay, I will stop there, I think, because there's only, wait, is there another good slide? No, that's it. All right, do you have anything else to say? You were going to say
I was
something.
going to say that that's like what Wittgenstein thinks about philosophy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Does this
Anyone
have
else?
Any axioms?
Linguistic.
Yeah, he thinks that axioms are just sort of inappropriate for mathematics. That he's distinguishing between math itself and like the things that we write down. The things that we write down are not math. The things that we write down are just communication between mathematicians doing math independently in their own minds. All right. Say goodbye to period 8.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye period 8. Have fun watching this video.